Hi and welcome to today's webinar. So you've got me, Becca, talking about the interviewer report today. So what is the interviewer report? It's the new and improved version of what was previously known as the interview guidance report. So it's basically an enhanced version. It's got all of the same information and more, including a section on self-presentation and response style and additional narrative exploring personality in more depth, as well as your candidate's potential strengths and concerns. So unlike some of the other reports, the interview guidance report, or should I say the interviewer report, is not based on a model, rather it's a tool to assist you with the interviewing process. So it doesn't really have a model or theory in the same way. It's based on Criterion's research over the last 26 years. So I'm just going to get straight into it today. So I'm first going to show you what the report looks like and go through it page by page. So who is the interviewer report designed for? Well, of course it's designed to be used by anyone conducting an interview or coaching session. This means interviewers, hiring panels, recruiters, common sense of course given the name, but what might be less obvious is that it can also be used by managers and coaches in the context of things like development planning, alongside other reports such as onboarding or the Criterion personal feedback report, which is also suited for these purposes. So what does it do? So the report identifies the strongest elements of an individual's personality, along with any potential implications these may have on their potential performance in a role. It also includes advice and questions that will help you to follow up and explore their results from any psychometric tests they've completed. So primarily, interview guidance reports have been used mainly for personality profile interviewing. However, the new Criterion interview report also incorporates ability test questions if your candidate has completed any of those. So going back to who the report's designed for, the advice, guidance and questions work most effectively when used by a trained interviewer or feedback provider as a means of gathering concrete evidence on how the candidate has performed or behaved in the past. It's a valuable tool and it's designed for a layman, and by that I mean anyone who doesn't necessarily have a test user training or similar qualification. But it does still require some level of interviewing skill or technique in order for a high quality interview to be conducted. So the report's a good tool, but it won't automatically make you an amazing interviewer. It just provides a solid grounding on which you can build upon your skills. So yeah, next page, we're going to go through the first page of the report, which is the strongest preferences section. So this talks about the elements of personality from the questionnaire that was completed, where your candidate is most different from other people. So those scales and attributes that they describe themselves as having the strongest tendency or preferences for. And it's important to note that these can be at the high or low end of a scale. So you can see here on the left-hand side, we've got some very, very high scores, 9 and 10, and then some at the opposite end of the scale, 2, 2 and 2. So it tends to avoid mid-scoring scales of average 5 and 6, which means they're fairly similar to the comparison group. If we just go to the next page, you can see a section of this first page of the report, the preferences page, a bit up close, so you can see the kind of narrative that's provided. So this is for the scale optimistic. You can see that our candidate, Olivia in this case, scored 10 on this scale. And the report then just provides a bit of brief narrative on what this actually means and what this may look like in terms of how behaviours, tendencies, preferences at work. So compared to other people, she described herself as feeling very confident about the future and has a strong tendency to feel positive and optimistic in almost all situations. So that's the usefulness of summary, quite succinct, not too detailed, but allows you to get an understanding of what that score would mean. And then on the right-hand side, in the purple box, it tells you that optimistic was the first strongest preference or tendency. So this is the one that Olivia was most distant from compared to the comparison group. And these will be ranked 1 to 5, given that there's 5 in total, so first, second, third, fourth and fifth strongest. And it also tells you where you can find more information, including interview questions on this scale. So in this case, it's telling you to go to the stimulation page of the report, which will provide you with a bit more information about strengths and potential concerns, and also some interview questions that draw on this score on this scale. So the next page is a completely new page, which is the self-presentation page, and this hones in on things like impression management, self-presentation, whether the candidate was open and honest when they completed the questionnaire. So obviously it's a self-report measure, so there is scope for the candidate to attempt to portray themselves in a favourable manner. We'll all understand that when we apply for jobs, there's motivation to present ourselves in the best possible light to our potential employer, and people will often try to manage the impression they create through the way they describe themselves in interviews, or in this case, potentially complete a questionnaire. So our off-the-shelf criterion personality questionnaires, the Criterion Core and the Criterion Enhanced, both include measures to identify the extent to which people may try to influence their results to create a positive picture of their personality. So this page basically talks you through, if your candidate looks as though they could have made such an attempt, what the impact is of this on you, and what you can do during the interviewing process to secure concrete answers and make sure that you're getting a real view of the candidate and what they may be like. So if I just click the next page again, you can see that these are the sections of the report a bit close. This page basically provides some advice on how interviewers should adapt their approach during the interview to minimise the effects of any self-presentation attempts. So going back to our lovely Olivia, you can see that she's got a score of 3, which suggests that she's actually fairly open about possible weaknesses and may even be slightly self-critical. So this is suggesting that she probably hasn't tried to present herself in a favourable way on this occasion. And so the interviewer is advised to adopt an encouraging approach during the interview, using a range of question styles to ensure strengths can be pulled into responses as well as weaknesses. So conversely, if Olivia had a high score, like possibly of 9 or 10, it would suggest that she hadn't been self-critical, but instead had presented signs of using favourable rating of herself and impression management. And then it would say to hone in and use concrete competency questioning to establish examples where she can fully demonstrate what it is in the past that shows she acts how she describes herself as. This bottom section here, what you need to know about response styles. This just talks about response styles more generally and gives you a bit more detail on impression management. So I'll just go through these very briefly. So the main things to pick up on is it's common, as we said. You know, there's a good reason why people might want to present themselves favourably in the context of going for a job. Also, in other situations outside of work, it's completely common when we're meeting someone's parents for the first time, if we're working in a customer-facing role, we're dealing with customers, you know, it's completely natural to try and present yourself in a favourable way. Next up is it's often linked with job performance. So this is just saying that impression management can sometimes be a good thing across a range of jobs and professions. So sometimes it's important that we do manage perceptions and demonstrate effective impression management skills. And this can actually be considered successful and a good attribute in a role, perhaps in a sales role, when we're trying to come across in a certain way to gain customers and meet our targets. And then finally at the bottom is sometimes it's all true. So this is saying that even if someone appears to be impression managing, what they said about themselves may in fact be entirely true anyway. So just because they've scored highly, you should be aware that it's not necessarily that they've lied. They might actually be like that in real life, and that's where the questioning comes in to try and determine this. So the next page is the interview guidance pages. So there's one of these pages for each of the competencies, and in this case it's stimulation again. So these focus in on the 2 strongest elements of personality for each competency. So if you have 4 competency headings, there'll be 2 on each. And that would leave you with 8 competencies in total of several questions for each. It's important to note that you don't have to ask your candidate all of the questions on the pages. You can see on this page alone there's 4 interview questions, and if you imagine having 4 competencies with 4 questions on each, that would total 16 questions, which is a fairly lengthy interview. So do make sure you read the interview guidance report for your candidate beforehand, and possibly make a mark next to those questions that you would particularly like to find out more about and that are interesting to you as a recruiter and are important to the role. So these pages contain the score. Again, you can see in the circle icon. The narrative, which just describes a bit like we saw earlier about what this score looks like in terms of behaviours, preferences and tendencies. A new box, which is potential strengths and concerns associated with their score in that particular scale, and of course the interview questions. So if we just zoom in, this scale was resilience, for example. So you can see score of 9, high score on resilient, a bit of narrative here about what that looks like. There's only one potential strengths and concerns bullet in this particular instance, and that's saying that a candidate was 9 on resilient, has the strength of being very emotionally resilient. Great. This little diagram here, the OK job fit yellow puzzle piece, that's to do with job matching or a job fit score. I'm not going to touch too much on that. We've actually got a webinar running on Friday the 27th of October where you can learn more about this job matching function, available on Coast. And this is where you can tailor scoring for your particular job profile when you design your personality questionnaire. So interview questions, they all come as like a nice lead-in sentence, so you aren't just given a ton of bullet points with no context. It does have a nice lead-in that describes the candidate's personality, tendency or preference, and then it goes on to ask for concrete examples of that particular behaviour. So the next page is the ability results page. So you'll only get this if you have asked your candidates to complete an ability test, one or more of them. If you have only asked them to complete a personality questionnaire, then you will not get this page, of course. Similar format to the other pages we've just gone through in more detail. But what's great about this page is not only does it provide you with interview questions relating to any ability test your candidate completed, but it also gives you a comprehensive overview of their score. Click to the next page. So you can see on the right-hand side, here are the questions, and you can see here the scoring again, and also a bit of narrative. And what this means is that you can actually use your interviewer report as a means of interpreting both personality and ability for your candidates, which removes the need for the ability test report and can, in theory, save you your coast credits to use on other things. So you will get a bit more detail, of course, about the ability results of your candidates if you were to download the ability test performance report. However, you do get a bit of an overview and also some questions. So if you've had a bit of experience using the system, you don't necessarily need to download both, and that will save you your coast credits. So just go So that's a comprehensive overview of the interviewer report. A bit briefer than some of the other reports, as I said, because there isn't as much theory behind it. If anyone has any questions, do feel free to ask them now, or if they come to you later. If you have any requests for sample reports or an information sheet, please do email us at letterbox@criterion.co.uk or drop us a line at 01273 734 000. So I'd just like to finish by giving you some information about upcoming webinars myself and the Criterion team have scheduled for the next month or two. So we've got 3 more running in October. Every Friday they start at 11, with the exception of today. We've got personal feedback report, the job matching report, which I touched on earlier, and the leadership report. There are 3 outstanding report webinars that we have scheduled. And then we've also thrown some ones with different themes into the mix. So we've got game-based assessment with Criterion Director Alan Redmond, and what gamification looks like in the psychometrics industry today. We've also got attribution management and customer experience. And you'll be excited to know we've also got Psychology of Christmas coming up in December. And in the new year, we've got Assessment Centre Best Practice. So there's lots to tune into. So thanks very much for joining. I look forward to seeing you soon.